recording on your screen. And thank you for joining us on this joint exploration today of a very urgent matter. I will introduce an overview of the speakers and the session and why we gathered here today. And then we will step into our panel presentations and come back to a general discussion. So I'm going to be already sharing screen. And for Annie, I'll just mention that, of course, this day is part of the NPACS, the Environmental Peacebuilding Association conference, the virtual day of the conference, and this session will be available as a recording as well. And if you need any technical support, we have Carl Brook with the title on the Zoom saying NPACS. He can support with any technical needs if any arise. Here we go again. I'll be switching my presentation now. Okay. So during this session, we're going to be looking into the general context of this work. What is the situation of coral reefs worldwide? We'll hear some case studies from the Gulf of Aqaba and the Mesoamerican Reef. Can you hear me okay? Because I'm frozen on my computer.
We can hear you fine.
Okay. Good. And it was important for us as we were preparing for this panel and the Zoom. We know it's important for us as scholars to acknowledge the complexities that we're working in, and what's guiding us is the urgency of the global crisis of coral reefs and how it's recognized internationally. And we are going to highlight the need and the opportunities to collaborate in order to work with this urgency. Nevertheless, we also acknowledge the political complexities of the region some of us are coming from, and the violence initiated by governments at the moment. And we have different approaches of how we acknowledge that, how we discuss it, especially as scholars from the natural sciences and social sciences. And we will have space to discuss that in the conversation, in the open discussion and panel. So it's also heads up for those of you who might be wondering about these topics and how we work together. All of us here on the panel are people who are committed and working in Transboundary Environmental Cooperation for many years. So please keep those questions and thoughts and ideas also for the conversation. And for us, it was important to acknowledge it from the beginning. So what we will do today, we will hear about the global context. We will dive into some case studies. After we deeply understand the problem, we will also look into the mechanisms and the strategies to work with this dire urgency and the coral reef crisis worldwide as part of global climate change and local environmental stressors. And we will zoom in into some approaches, including multi-stakeholder approaches, marine protected areas, and others. And we will conclude with factors that influence the success and failure of this work, with lessons learned from the field that we will share as practitioners. And we are very happy to have experts in this field joining us today. And we will have Professor Moaz Fine from the Hebrew University and the IUI be our first speaker, followed by Dr. Melanie McField from Healthy Reefs, Healthy People, working with the Mesoamerican Reef system. I will then present the case study of the Integrated Coastal Zone Management, and I will do that on behalf of the Arava Institute for Environmental Studies and the municipality of Eilat. And Dr. Suleiman Halassa will be sharing about the factors influencing the success and failure. And Dr. Suleiman Halassa is an associated researcher with Oxford University. And Dr. Ali El-Sawalme is going to join us as a discussant in the panel, and I'll introduce you as well at the end of our short presentations. So each presenter will have 10 minutes. And as agreed, I will open my mic at 8 minutes. So I'll tell you, Maoz, Melanie, and Suleiman whenever it's 8 minutes has passed, and to remind you that you have 2 minutes left. And we will keep the questions for after the presentations. Okay, so Maoz, I will stop sharing screen so you can begin once I figure out how to get to that screen. Here we go.
Thank you, Rina. I'll share my screen now. Hopefully you can see it. Thanks for the opportunity. I am a marine ecologist at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem and the Inter-University Institute of Marine Science in Eilat, Israel, studying environmental stress and how it affects coral reefs of the world, primarily global environmental stress. And what am I doing here in a environmental peace building conference? Well, I'll tell you the story of how I got to be involved in all this, and it all starts in the Gulf of Aqaba. But we'll start with a few words about the general settings of coral reefs of the world. Coral reefs, as most biodiverse ecosystem, provide us with many ecological services, as we tend to call them: food, coastal protection, livelihood, cultural assets, and a lot of biodiscovery. Because of the long co-evolution of so many organisms on limited space, a lot of communication developed, a lot of chemistry that is aimed at attracting each other in the water column, or deterring each other in competition for space underwater on the reef real estate. That chemistry can be used for pharmaceutical products, natural products, and many, many ideas that are down there, and we just have to harvest them. I'm not talking about harvesting the organisms, just harvesting ideas down there. And in fact, we're looking at the largest pharmacy on the planet. And I tend to say what Melanie will say in the following talk as well. The health of future generations, human generations, are highly dependent on the health of coral reefs. However, coral reefs are on the brink of collapse. Over the past few decades, we've lost many reefs, about 80% of the Caribbean, maybe more, 50% of the Indo-Pacific reefs. 2024 was a devastating year for coral reefs of the world. Within 1 year, more than 80% of coral reefs of the world were impacted by this global marine heat wave and bleaching event that killed and bleached so many reefs. And it's mainly because of coral bleaching, a phenomenon that is responsible for mortality of reef-building corals that are so dependent on the special symbiosis between the coral host, the animal, and the unicellular algae that live inside the tissue at densities of over 1 million per square centimeter and provide the coral with its main energy source. When seawater temperature rises 1 to 2 degrees above the summer maximum, this symbiosis breaks down, the coral loses its main energy source and eventually die, and with it, all the ecological services that we've just mentioned, because the corals are the engineering species that are responsible for the framework of the reef. And since global warming is ongoing, and on top of that, we have an intensifying marine heat waves, it is predicted that we will see more and more reefs globally being degraded, looking much more like the one on the right rather than the one on the left that provide us with the ecological services. and that's bad news for us all. The solutions are quite obvious. The first step would be aggressive mitigation of greenhouse gas emissions. We need strong commitment to the Paris Agreement, but right now it doesn't look like we're following this route, and we'll need to work much harder and invest much more in mitigation of greenhouse gas emissions. Step 2 will be finding places that have a better chance of survival, places where we can focus conservation efforts, places or reefs that have better chance for various reasons, be it oceanographic or more genetic selection, but this is where we have to invest our conservation efforts. One such place is the Gulf of Aqaba in the northern Red Sea, where reefs are beautiful, and most importantly, these reefs never experienced mass bleaching event. Although in 2024, we have witnessed the strongest marine heat wave globally. The strongest marine heat wave globally was in the Gulf of Aqaba. Only minor bleaching event took place. Looking at the graph below, you will see the intensity of this marine heat wave that was really gigantic in terms of the periods and intensity of seawater temperature in the Gulf, yet corals were doing pretty good, and they recovered in 2025 when seawater temperature dropped. And this is very good news and big hope for coral reefs of the Gulf of Aqaba, and we think we understand why this is the case. When these corals enter the Red Sea through the Straits of Bab el-Mandeb following the last glacial maximum, they have to first settle in the southern part of the Red Sea, where seawater temperature is very warm during summer, 33, 34 degrees centigrade in midsummer. Only the ones that could survive these high temperatures and reach sexual maturity are the ones that eventually migrated northward in a stepping stone manner to reach the Gulf of Aqaba and the northern Red Sea, where temperatures are 7 degrees lower. So this is the only case we are aware of that corals underwent thermal selection or selection for thermal tolerance and are capable to withstand in the northern part temperatures just like the southern part of very warm temperatures and have a better chance of survival. So they have kind of an insurance policy that they can do pretty good in the future. And there's ample evidence right now to suggest that indeed they are highly thermal tolerant. And this is coming from more genetic and more or physiological and ecological evidence. Problem is that the same studies also provide us evidence to the fact that these corals are sensitive to more local stresses such as pollution and overexploitation. And when we exposed corals to more local stresses, their thermal tolerance was compromised. So it is quite obvious that if we are to conserve these reefs for future generations and for the developing economies that are so dependent on reefs in this region, and especially the 4 countries that share these reefs in the Gulf of Aqaba, Egypt, the largest reef-based economy, as well as Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and Israel. If we are to conserve it, we have to eradicate these local stresses, and doing so can be done only together because these stresses, pollution, and knows no borders, recognizes no geopolitical borders, And so we have to manage it together.
2 minutes.
We started by initiating or founding the Transnational Red Sea Center, which was aimed at doing exactly that thing, getting all countries in the Red Sea under the neutral umbrella of the Swiss Foreign Ministry, providing sharing countries data, open data, and the science needed under the principle of diplomacy for science, science for diplomacy, to bring everyone together on the same boat, so to speak, to collect the necessary data. We've established coral monitoring stations that are aimed at collecting data on coral performance and health in real time and sharing it on the cloud to allow the richer and the more low-income countries to have in real time data on coral health for best practice and management of these reefs. We believe that if we are to protect the Gulf of Aqaba from local pressure, we will have the largest coral refuge on Earth, and these reefs can withstand global change and global warming. So there's a shared natural treasure that is shared by Jordan, Israel, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt. There's science that recognizes no borders. We scientists are already collaborating and sharing the data, and we should keep doing so and expand the effort. And we have to realize that the window is closing up. There's rapid coastal development by all four nations that has to be restrained, and with the right science, we can develop it in a sustainable manner. Otherwise, we will miss the greatest opportunity to save the coral reefs. We think that making the Gulf of Aqaba a World Heritage Site, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, is the way to go. We've published this white paper on that subject, and we think that if leaders of the four countries will be wise to go together for something that is beyond any conflict, we will earn an immense opportunity to have reefs for future generations of the Gulf of Aqaba. And with this beautiful slide of Noah, a singer and a peace activist, serving a beautiful Gulf of Aqaba coral reef photo to the Pope, I'll end my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mose. So for those who join us after the opening, welcome at this early morning time, at least in the Northern Hemisphere, in the US and Canada, and those from the region. There will also be a recording of this panel. So for those of you listening to the recording, even though you won't be able to engage with us in conversation, you can reach us for further conversation through the organizers of the conference. And for those who joined, we will have questions, and the fact that you will be able to go deep with your questions for the attendees of this webinar. We will open for questions and discussion after the presentations of our panelists and our presenters today. So we're passing to Melanie with Healthy Reefs for Healthy People. Thank you for joining us. And you can share screen. Thank you.
Let's get this up here. All right. So yes, thank you, Mouse, for that very thorough introduction to coral bleaching. Here's what it looks like on our reef back in 2023-24. Yes, you'll hear more about that, but I'm talking more about the collaboration between these four countries and the real effort that our NGO community, along with government partners, has pulled together over the last really 20 years. This is the Mesoamerican Reef region. We include the watersheds. It's the four countries of Mexico, Belize, Guatemala, and Honduras. It includes this Belize Barrier Reef that is a World Heritage Site. It includes mangrove, seagrasses. We've got biodiversity in terms of threatened species with manatees, whale sharks. And the value of it is very well known to the local communities because tourism is really driving the economies in these countries. That's what a healthy reef looks like. That was our idea. In 2004, we started this effort to look at how do you define a healthy reef? We need to know what we're talking about and have a common currency in order to be able to conserve it. So we came up with this, which is a framework for how we can assess the health of a coral reef based on these four main indicators: live coral cover, fleshy macroalgae, herbivorous fish, and commercial fish. And we've done 8 of these report cards and a book that kind of describes, we began with this talking about the fundamentals of reef health. Just to give you an overview of what the last one, this came out in 2024. We're working on the 2026 report card now. We do it every other year. A 5 would be a perfect score, and we were halfway there last time. So we've gotten up to a 2.8 in the past, but it's kind of this waffling back and forth. You improve, and then something happens. In both of these cases, it was bleaching events, really, and also COVID had a little impact on us that I'll discuss more later. But you can see we can break this down by country, and you can see among the 4 indicators, the green is good and the red is critical. It's very bad. So making it very understandable to people. So let's focus on coral as the framework builder, as Mouse was saying, you can't have a reef without this coral as the fundamental piece. We map it out with the 4 different countries. We've got, a collaboration of partners that are working together, and about over 70 partners in the Mesoamerican reef focused on reef conservation. And about 20 of those actually help with the data collection. We're all using a standardized method. And you can see that in this last one, this was measured during the bleaching event. So really that bleaching event barely had any impact. The one the report card that's coming out this year is going to show the full impact of that. But you can see just the temperatures up until this 2023. So this went through the full year of 2023, and 2024 was essentially the same. NOAA had to create 3 additional levels of alerts because it's like the hurricane scale. You had to, Cat 5 is no longer good enough. You have to go up to a Cat 8. So that's what these corals have experienced. And you can see here 100% of the reefs were exposed to mortality risk, which is over 8 degrees of heating, 8-degree heating weeks. So you can see here, and also in this one, just the level. Many reefs were over 16 and some up to 24-degree heating weeks, which is just unheard of. I think look beginning at this center graph, and you can see these are the 4 global bleaching events. And 21% of the reefs were exposed to bleaching in 1998 versus 84% in this last bleaching event. So it was significant in terms of the scale and the intensity. And, the idea that we are inside the tipping point for coral reefs to survive is in this publication, the Global Tipping Points Report. It's one of 3 global ecosystems that are considered to be within this range. 1.2 degrees Celsius is kind of the center zone of that range of the tipping point, and every reef is not experiencing the same thresholds or the same amount of heating, but we are within that range globally, and definitely some reefs are experiencing that or even higher. And it's not temperature is the main thing we're focused on in terms of climate change, but there are all these other stressors, that are associated with climate change, including acidification, increased intensity of storms, deoxygenation, which also is becoming a bigger impact, or it's more well recognized now. And then there are all the other things that Mouse had mentioned that are the localized stressors. So what we're beginning to realize is that, the current efforts, all the mitigation, and even if we were reaching those targets that countries had assigned to, it looks like there's no way, we're going to not cross 1.5, 2026, and all of these different models that are, projecting what's happening to the ocean temperatures. There's a lot of, differences, but actually they all kind of converge in relatively the same time frames. But we're crossing this border, and this 1.5 is probably a little too conservative. It should probably be 1.2 degrees that we try to maintain under to keep reefs healthy. But there are these engineering approaches that are now also on the table because we're not able to get there with just emissions reductions. So things in Australia looking at cloud brightening, nanobubble cooling, and even ocean alkalinity to help corals be able to handle stress more. We're also looking at what could be done internationally regarding litigation and the reef rights, and how can you use the inter-American courts. There was last year, there was both the International Court of Justice, and then the year previous, there was this Inter-American Court of Human Rights, both issuing opinions about the rights of people in the countries that have coral reefs to be able to potentially take litigation against polluters. So this is all a new thing. We are working with the Environmental Law Center, looking at, they have a template for rights of reefs, how you could give personhood and legal rights on behalf of the coral reefs, and then have litigation be able to be passed either within your country or internationally, using a number of these tools, declarations, national laws and governments, and different approaches using local NGOs and environmental groups and government support with this. So that's also one of the ways that we are looking at kind of collectively, how could we, and maybe even conjoining the 4 countries together in some kind of legal action. Uh-oh. Sorry. Guess I thought I had taken those off. So sorry. That was a previous version. I had to record it of myself. Let me go back. Okay, so this one, no dear. Okay, that is just, this is a transition to let you know that it's not just corals we have to worry about on a coral reef. We are worried about the whole ecosystem and the way it functions. And this fleshy macroalgae in the Caribbean is a pervasive problem. It competes with the coral and takes over space. It's due mainly to nutrients and lack of herbivores. So we work together. We work together on the things like the Cartagena Convention. Oh, why is it not going backwards?
There's about 2.5 more minutes.
Okay, yes. International conventions like Cartagena Convention help reduce, give us some methods for reducing effluents and then we're also working locally with local municipalities and sewage treatments and on campaigns. We've gotten parrotfish protected in the 4 countries. You see it happened in different time frames in the different countries. And this is probably the first instance of transboundary cooperation, protecting an herbivore in order for its function for reef conservation, because we need to reduce herbivory. And you can see the impact of that, particularly, between 2021, 23, we've had an increase in the biomass of these fish after each country has protected the species. We're also working on a nature-based solution with king crab mariculture. So it's looking at done a system of mariculture with the Caribbean king crab with the idea that and that is an herbivore that actually works and it could provide livelihoods for fishermen too. So commercial fish is the last of the 4 indicators that we look at overall in reef health. And this is a really tough one because we don't have a lot of fish management rules and regulations. The main thing that we use is protected areas. And you can see that, I think that commercial fish within the fully protected zones is much higher. It's significantly higher than the highly protected zones or the open areas of an MPA. So when you hear people talk about MPAs, always make sure you ask a little further, how protected is it? Because just calling it a protected area, it gives some additional rules, but not full protection. And that's what you really need to provide a replenishment zone, letting the fish reach their full maturity size and be able to reproduce and repopulate areas outside. So these are all the other things that need to be done within the reef system. And finally, I'll just show you this one transboundary reef area. It's called the Cayman Crown, right in the center there, that circle, discovered in 2014, because of course, fishermen, primarily in Guatemala and Honduras, were using this reef to some extent, but they let my coordinator in Guatemala in on the secret, and she surveyed it, and then we began to study this reef and do bathymetric monitoring. It wasn't even on any of the global coral reef maps. So it's now known to science, it's known to the countries, communities. Belize and Guatemala both protected it in 2020, but their protections overlap. So this is right in the border zone between Belize and Guatemala, which is like right around here, and it's in discussion or in consideration at the International Court of Justice. So it's, Guatemala has had a standing claim on Belize, for like over 50% of its territory. So that is going to be settled sometime soon. And then this whole agreement can be worked out. And the fact that the NGOs have been collaborating for many years really helps to get this more, aligned. So when it happens, we'll be able to move forward with even better management. So I'll just give a plug for the documentary that tells you the full story about this region and say thank you.
Thank you, Melanie. We're going to have more questions to what you do and the strategies that work in the conversation, because I think it's one of the best examples I know of that actually reach incredible outcomes. So I will share a screen now and continue the conversation with the case study of the Gulf of Aqaba, and before that, more of a conceptual conversation about what works, what mechanisms exist for this complex task of transboundary conservation. Again, I have to switch modes here. So we asserted by now the need and the urgency. And what I will focus on, and I'm going to start my own timer, apologies, is how we do it and what mechanisms we have. So we heard some strategies and mechanisms presented by Moaz and Melanie, and we will continue this conversation. And I will specifically elaborate about a multi-stakeholder approach for integrated coastal zone management for the Gulf of Aqaba, but also discuss the need of a multi-stakeholder approach for transboundary conservation of marine environments and particularly coral reefs. So obviously there's a collection of approaches that we can name, whether it's regional agreements that they can be bilateral or multilateral, that support governance structures and create laws and also enforcement mechanisms. We have transboundary marine protected areas, which, as Melanie said, can be kind of a stamp saying there is a protected area, but of course needs to be looked into a lot deeper. The framework called ICZM, Integrated Coastal Zone Management, I will elaborate on, but it's one that puts together different stakeholders to look into the marine and coastal environments as in a way, one unit, and combine and create policy frameworks that support balance between conservation and development. We have formal and informal scientific networks that are crucial for creating trust, evidence base, and exchanging knowledge and information, which are always the basics of anything we do. And we can have multi-stakeholder platforms that are, again, less formal mechanisms that create continuity, accountability, and they can be framed either by NGOs or by international organizations. And another mechanism or theme is, of course, the sustainable finance. We know that all of these approaches and doing any sort of meaningful conservation requires long-term viability that can be created through financial schemes. And of course, we heard also by now, it's not one approach versus the other. Usually what we're looking for is a combined strategy that has some, if not all, of these mechanisms mentioned here. And as a social scientist or a social researcher, you'll see that my PowerPoints have more words than pictures, so I'm going to pick a few that I expand on. In our case of such a complicated situation where there's any environmental situation can be seen as complex, where it involves the natural systems, the human systems, and the interdependency. When it comes to the marine environment, and planning, and the different sectors that are in charge of both planning, policy, and implementation, we meet a very complex landscape and a lot of diverse actors that most of the time do not naturally speak to each other on a daily basis. So the management of coastal and marine environments is very fragmented. If, for example, if you look at a municipality, a coastal municipality, you will have the people in the engineering departments or planning departments in charge of planning a coastal zone area in terms of its tourism needs, its development, environmental, and you will have an environmental unit in the same municipality that doesn't necessarily have the same authority over the planning or doesn't have authority over the planning or the engineering components. And that's just one example of the fragmentation. Again, I'm moving a little bit fast because some of this I think is very, very clear to why we need these complicated and multi-stakeholder approaches. When we look at the pieces of the puzzle and the pieces of the solution, we know that there are certain limits that we can push for, or certain goals we can push for in terms of the scientific community, the local community, and the authority. And without the collaboration between one and another, as a municipality or a national government, when we can create laws. But if we don't have local buy-in, as we all know, there can be a lot of resistance and lack of cooperation towards law and enforcement, or even understanding of why certain policies exist, whether it's through planning or through fines and enforcement, and vice versa. We can have initiatives as the NGO world, especially in our region, but not only, if we don't have top-down support coming from the national governments, these efforts, whether they will be local cleanups of inside of underwater sites or on the coast, their capacity to create meaningful change is also limited. When we're now going to zoom in into the Gulf of Aqaba, when we're looking at the Gulf of Aqaba and its population, we're talking about parts of the Red Sea, which has 4 countries on the coast of the Gulf of Aqaba. We have Jordan, Israel, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and Egypt. And it's a fairly scarce population, but a very strong and rising tourism industry that fluctuates according to the political situation. The numbers you see here on the presentation are merely an estimation. It's not easy to estimate exactly the population in Taba. I have here Sharm el-Sheikh, even because it's at the southern, it's not exactly part of the Gulf of Aqaba, but it's adjacent and it's right at the opening of the Red Sea. But we see growing populations also here. When we try to estimate the amount of people and income depending on this coral reef system, the estimations go anywhere between 8 million to 28 million, and it depends how we quantify it. But we know that the people in our region are highly dependent on these coral reefs, whether it's from the local heritage components to the financial and to the environmental functions. We understand why we need to protect this environment. There are some existing frameworks in the Red Sea specifically from political reasons the strongest framework called PERSCA cannot include Israel and Eritrea. And we know there are existing efforts of each municipality and each nation, but we're still lacking one framework that creates collaboration between the four countries of the Gulf of Aqaba. Why we have to do it in a transboundary manner, I think for all those participating in this webinar, and as asserted by Moaz and Melanie, we all understand that natural resources that are transboundary in their nature do not understand our man-made geopolitical borders. And when it comes to the Gulf of Aqaba, the distances, the connections between the small, semi-enclosed sea are minimal. And whenever we have any, whether it's pollution incident or any overfishing situation in one of the countries, immediately has an immediate impact on the other. When we had an oil spill, an 11-ton oil spill, a crude oil spill in Aqaba 2-3 years ago, in 2 or 3 days, it reached the coast of Dahab, and there was actually some collaboration between the countries following this oil spill. So I think the need is clear. Why ICZM, or what is ICZM? ICZM is an approach for integrated coastal zone management, which in its design aims to balance both conservation and development. And in its essence, it looks into conflict, meaning it takes into account that there's going to be conflict in whatever we try to do to balance conservation and development, whether it's the innate conflicts between those who are in charge of economic well-being of populations, whether it's national stakeholders or municipal stakeholders, and of course, environmental groups, scientists who can be on both sides of conservation and development. We have conflict between the sectors themselves, within governmental ministries, between disciplines, and of course, between nations. And the ICZM framework looks into all of this and takes it into consideration in its actual design. So what we're talking about is creating a framework for sectorial cooperation that integrates local and regional and national levels and develops multidisciplinary forums to map and prioritize the protection of the coral reefs of the Gulf of Aqaba. And I'm going to stop in a moment because my time is almost out. The way we do this, we create different circles within each context. So a circle of work with the local organizations and civil society and community. We have a circle of the local authorities, regional councils, municipalities. We have a circle of governments and the representatives from different governmental ministries that have some kind of stake within the coastal and marine management. And we have the transboundary circle. And what I'm sharing with you is a project we actually promoted with Egyptian and Jordanian colleagues. And I'm going to bypass the goals to skip to the outcomes. And part of what we're aiming for is creating policy proposals that each of the countries will adopt and producing shared projects. So creating a platform for both collaboration between a shared language between the countries sharing the Gulf of Aqaba, and not stopping with policy or shared language and scientific exchange, but also creating a platform for joint projects, which this transboundary forum will choose and prioritize together. So this approach is a very participatory strategy to marine conservation, both in the local capacity and the transboundary capacity, where the stakeholders meet together, we prioritize our urgencies, and where we feel we can actually make a difference, we choose them together, and then we implement accordingly. And I will stop here and allow for more questions in the conversation. And I will be passing it to you, Suleiman. And before I pass it to you, sorry, we had a little segue, Suleiman and I. So from our attendees here, you can raise a virtual hand, or if you have your camera open, please raise your hand if you participated in Transboundary Environmental Cooperation efforts. I hope we can see that, actually. I'm not sure we can see that. I think we can.
I think with the webinar, that's
We
not
can't
possible.
see. Yeah, okay. So we're just asking, so if people here participated in Transboundary Environmental Cooperation, also asking if anyone here participated in Transboundary Environmental Cooperation in conditions of conflict or post-conflict. And that's a segue to Suleiman, which will speak about the complexities of doing this work in general, transboundary cooperation, and especially when it comes to conflict and post-conflict regions.
Yes, thank you, Rina. And hi, everyone. My name is Suleiman Halasa. I'm a research fellow at the Institute for Science, Innovation and Society, which is part of the School of Anthropology at the University of Oxford. And I'm also affiliated with the Araba Institute for Environmental Studies. I will be sharing my screen. Let's see. I think you see my presentation. So I'm not an expert on coral reefs or marine ecology or any of that. My main field of work is sustainability and sustainable development and implementing transboundary projects that actually lead to better situation of the environment, also taking into consideration the need of the communities in that ecosystem. So at start, I would like to also remind all of us of why Aqaba and the Gulf of Aqaba is important for Jordan. I want to focus more on my home country and how things are being seen there, and why, plus or in addition to the political situation in the Middle East, why the situation of the Gulf of Aqaba is even more special. So the Gulf of Aqaba has one of the main Jordanian cities, Aqaba, the city of Aqaba, which Rina mentioned already, and it has approximately between 120 to 150,000 people living there. It's the only port for Jordan, which means so much traffic is happening over there. 80% of Jordan's import and export actually passes through Aqaba. And in the last couple of months, because of the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, other countries around are using the Gulf or using Aqaba as the port there to import and export their needs. And here we talk about mainly Iraq, some parts of Saudi Arabia as well via Kuwait, which increased the traffic both inland and also at the port. Aqaba is also one of the main corners of the three triangles of the Golden Triangle for tourism in Jordan, and that's Petra, Wadi Rum, and Aqaba. So the amount of tourism that goes in the city is amazing. It's actually one of the main economical activities happening in the city. It's also a very important industrial area. Aqaba hosts three major industrial zones in Jordan, and of course, all of them are utilizing the port, using the option of accessibility. Aqaba itself is a special economic zone, and it has a special economic zone authority, its own authority, mainly to leverage the advantage that Aqaba has over all the other Jordanian cities by having access to the sea. And recently, the city developed a blueprint or the blue economy of the city that includes and integrates different activities, mainly trying to look into utilizing the situation, the position of the city, and try to reach or to achieve sustainability in how things are being developed. And that being said, there are lots of achievements that happened in the city, and maybe Ali will be able to elaborate more of what I'm going to say afterwards. But if we look into how Jordan is managing its part of the shore, in the Gulf of Aqaba. We see that there are lots of global recognition and protection enhancement of the situation. It is listed as an IUCN green on the green list of the IUCN. It is in the process or nominated for a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and Aqaba will be actually passed the initial technical evaluation. The problem here is like it's only like each country is advocating for its part of the shoreline, which is highlights very much what Rina is talking about, and what how it would be much easier if there is a collaborative work in achieving that. All facilities, tourist facilities in Aqaba are required to have the blue flag status, and there've been the state of Aqaba is also part of the Green Fence Conservation Initiative. So there are lots of compliance that has been done in the last couple of years in order to make sure that whatever activity is done in Aqaba is in line with the conservation of the marine life, the corals, and the sea. And also there has been several mass public cleanups of the ocean, of the bottom of the ocean, led by so many different organizations, including the military. Most of the times, actually, even the king will be joining these cleanups campaigns in order to, first of all, raise the awareness of the people of what's going on, because usually king's participation will get lots of attention in the media. And second, to show what is actually the importance and how significant the corals in Aqaba and the sea for Jordan as a country. So to move from there to the collaboration, and I would like to mention here some research that was done in order to identify the failure or success factors that we can account for or can affect any transboundary environmental collaboration or work. There've been several. This is one of the studies that was done, and it actually highlights main themes of what can be done. I will not go in details of each one of them, but the paper is available, and I would like to use this as an entry point for the work that we did in the past and we are still doing in the region together, Rina and myself. We actually identified 3 different groups of factors that govern or decides how the work is being done, and this is mainly between Jordan and Israel. So these main factors are internally for the countries themselves and what is their own interest. There is exogenous and from other factors outside the region, and also interaction factors between the 2 nations together. And I would say that the main interest here is how to show that working together on solving this issue is actually good for both parties, or for all parties involved. And the way that out of the whole thing, we developed our own methodology. And here I would like to focus mainly on 3 themes. And that's how I will end my talk here, but like mainly looking into involving international parties. And by meaning that, international organization, international NGOs, even well-reputation academic institutions that will make communication and easier, facilitate the collaboration itself, and in a way it actually guarantees the continuation of the work, even if the political scene doesn't let that happen. There've been so many different initiatives, including that. UN is one of them, the US different funding like MERT, Middle East Regional Cooperation, all that enables that to happen by mainly having this third-party facilitation of the work. Our work is always under the radar. We are doing this because we would like to see things changing, things happening on the ground, the preservation work, the conservation, and we are not looking for making big, events that media will catch. We are not looking for the media coverage, as we mainly looking for making an impact and having a result on the ground. And that's very important for us because it's the main dilemma here that most funding agencies would like to see the impact and how to scale up and how to make it more public. While on the other hand, in order to make sure that the things and the projects that are implementing and moving forward and there is a success, we need to keep this all under the radar. And because Aqaba and Eilat, as an example of the work that we are doing, are far away from the center of the countries, we have this understanding that actually working together is the right way of doing things. If anything happens in Aqaba, for example, having a response or help from Eilat is way much faster than having it from anywhere else in the country. Eilat is only like 15 minutes away by car, including the border crossing, while the closest city in Jordan is Ma'an, which is around 2 hours, 2-hour drive. That's the same thing for Eilat. And also, if we expand that to the Taba or Nueva, the two cities in Egypt, and Haqil in Saudi Arabia is the same situation. So the understanding that proximity is very important. What we do in each one of these cities will affect us. And if there is anything going wrong, then we will be the first, hopefully, to respond, to help, but also to be affected. So I will leave it here. Thank you very much. And back to you, Rina.
Thank you, Suleiman. And as we continue, I will introduce Dr. Ali Al-Suwalme. And in the meantime, also, we will open up so attendees can actually open mics to ask questions and be with us in the conversation. So, Ali, and I'm going to introduce you and also ask you to provide your perspective from your experience. So Dr. Ali Al-Suwalme is a German and Jordanian associate researcher at the Marine Science Station, affiliated with the University of Jordan in Aqaba. And he's also a guest lecturer at the Max Planck Institute for Collides and Interfaces in Germany. And he finished his work, his MSc and PhD in Germany in the field of marine sciences, and focuses on multidisciplinary research that has to do with sustainability and coastal zone management, marine ecology, environmental conservation, and science diplomacy. So Ali, before we open for questions from the group and questions we have amongst us, would you like to share anything from your experience working in a cross-border manner on the Gulf of Aqaba, and from following what Suleiman shared now of what works and what doesn't, and how you frame it, especially as you're also deep, both the worlds of the natural sciences and sciences, sustainability, and social sciences. So anything you would like to share with us? And you'll need to unmute your mic.
Okay, yes, thank you, Rina, for this, for inviting me for this important session. Is it clear now, my voice? So, is it clear what I'm saying for my mic? Okay. Actually, when we discuss blue diplomacy, and especially in the context of the Gulf of Aqaba, we should know some restrictions and not restrictions, but also some boundary. Boundary limits. Mainly, we have, as previously mentioned, we have 4 countries, yes, and regardless of their agreement together, but with different languages, different political attitudes, and also at the same time, as also Dr. Sulaiman said, now it became a corridor, an economical corridor. I mean, to survive the current situation, especially the blocking Hormuz Strait. So, what is the solution now? So we know the problems, and what are the solutions? Actually, for me, after deep thinking and analysis, I think that we need now urgently shared activities between the countries, and especially monitoring. So, and maybe Maoz, remember, we have actually every site has a national monitoring program to monitor the coastal environment on their side and in our side. And I had the pleasure to be a part of a common monitoring sessions in the sea offshore. So I think that we should focus on implementing monitoring activities, because countries may disagree on facts and on concepts, but they cannot disagree on data. So data should be the hub, okay, the meeting hub of these countries. This is one point. The other point is actually, we are in the Gulf of Aqaba in a dire need for authorities or platforms that collect countries together. So in order to achieve the blue diplomacy, by the way, for me is very difficult issue, because as Wesley said, sea is not only a place for corals and marine ecosystem. Gulf Aqaba, or oceans or seas, it is a place also for a blue economy, and also a place for many activities, tourism, shipping. So it is really very important. So when we would like to talk about blue diplomacy, we should stress on a point that this place, which is the ocean, it is very important also for economy. So we can also focus on also like the nature-based solution, like Melanie was telling about. And so from my point of view is that the escape from this bottleneck, what we have right now, is first of all common and shared environmental monitoring. A second is a bilateral or multilateral international platforms to be established. And number 3, also shared economic projects, especially using the concept of nature-based solutions.
Thank you, Ali. We have a question specifically following Suleiman's part, a question from Rachel. If there are specific cases where there is interest in scaling up projects that worked under the radar, how do you scale up what works quietly without losing what made it work? So yeah, following also, segue from what Ali just shared as well.
I can mention give some example over here. Andrina, maybe you also know, you have some other examples, but like the one that I would like to focus on right now is our recent project which mainly because this session is recorded, I will not mention that project. I will just talk about it as the project. The idea is, in order to have an impact, as I said, we keep things under the radar. So and there are also some other techniques, and not only keeping things under the radar. We try to divide the work into different components that, each party, for example, the initiative that we're working on now includes Jordan, Israel, and Palestine. So each party will be working on their own component of that, with direct communication with the authorities over there. And once we reach to a critical mass, and this is mainly for, let's keep in the background what's going on and all the political difficulties that we have right now. Lots of people will think more than twice about initiating any collaboration project. And even, this panel, we had lots of discussions about how to frame it in the right way within the political context over here. So the way that we work on projects on the ground is, and this is very specific for this project, usually each case is very unique and it has its own techniques, depends on the dynamics. But for this specific one, the direct impact is very clear for the three parties. But of course, they cannot talk about it because of the political situation. So we try to reach or to have some milestones locally, accomplishments on the ground that will help scaling up or making scaling up more public. And in that case, what we are trying to do is to create this regional hub. And to do that, first of all, we need to do the local work. And hopefully, once the political scene is more suitable, things will be easier to take it public and to make it more. And that will not be part of our task. That will be owned by the local partners who are working on it. And for their own success, then they need to take it public. So I don't know if that answers the question. What I want to say is, like, mainly by looking case by case and find these leverage points where the people that we are working with, the communities themselves, would like to make it public afterwards in order to scale it up and in order to move forward.
I will add, since we worked together for about 15 years, Suleiman and I, that what we do, one of our strategies is to create local pilot projects that work from the ground up, and then scale them up to policy recommendations and proposals, but based on the successes in the field. So once we have any kind of pilot projects, we, through research and also policy analysis, we bring it up to the next level and approach national authorities or international institutes, and in that way support creating frameworks and policies. Ali, I think you wanted to comment, and then I have a question to Melanie, and of course, Melanie, Moaz, anybody can feel free to contribute to the question. Ali, did you want to answer the question as well? Ali, did you want to add anything to this topic that Rachel asked about scaling up? No, I thought you opened your mic. If not, it's okay. Okay, I'll let you think. So if there are more questions, you can either write it in the Q&As or open the mic. If you open the mic, we'll just stop the recording because we didn't do grant of license to all the participants. In the meantime, a question to Melanie, and also we'll follow with a question to Melanie and Moaz and Ali as people who come from the natural sciences, because both Suleiman and I, our expertise is the process. We said we're not marine biologists or ecologists. My field is environmental policy, and really the field itself is transboundary environmental cooperation. So a lot of our work focuses on what works, what doesn't. In your case, both Ali, Moaz, all three of you, it's many of the times scientists doing cooperation. So I'm curious if you could share, especially if we start with you, Melanie, any kind of factors that you think are successes or the keys to success in your context, and especially because in your context, you actually have very tangible outcomes that sometimes in our region we can still aspire to. So anything you can share about what works, and especially when it to the complexity of bringing scientists to collaborate across borders.
Thanks. I think, yeah, that is an interesting difference, kind of, because we came at this from how do we develop a common definition. We can understand reef health because some of the groups that so many different NGOs working on reef conservation in this region. Like I said, we have over 70 partner organizations, all of them working in the region. Some of those are international, but most of them are local groups. And so you could have a wide variety of thoughts about what is most important on a reef. So getting everyone to come together and just and they're scientists, but they're not most of them are not PhD scientists worried about publications. They are like practitioners working for an NGO, doing monitoring. They know their species. They do, everybody's in it for management and conservation, which is kind of a fundamental thing. We have run into some glitches sometimes when it's more academic. So I'll just leave that where it is. But coming around activities and starting with we do training. There's a rigorous training program. People get certified. They get their cards of reef monitoring. It's this, there's a protocol, Atlantic and Gulf Rapid Reef Assessment. And you get your certification in that. And then there's, a database they learn to use, and everyone has access to the data. That was a good fundamental starting point, I think, because, we weren't thinking about international diplomacy or anything other than sharing data and doing this work. But the other things kind of evolved out of it. And then the partners that are the working in the local groups, they each have their connections to the government agencies in that country, in each of their countries. And they can help push these policy implements, in their own way. So they've got all these existing connections and committees that everyone's on. And it just works and it's maybe a little different how many NGOs are involved and all of these co-management agreements with the government. It makes it a much more broad network, and it's kind of semi-official. They have rights to management and governance.
Thank you. And Moaz, would you like to answer this question about scientists working together and what works, like what are the secrets in your perspective? And then we can hear from Ali on the same topic. Then we have a question from one of the attendees.
Yeah, so I think our example, Ali's and mine, is really the crisis we're facing right now. So we like to be underwater diving. We like to be in the lab and look at coral physiology, but we have no choice right now but respond to a major crisis that threatens the livelihood of millions in the region. And that's what brought us together, and it's fun. But we realized that beyond the science that we're doing to support the conservation efforts, we had to reach the policymakers. Have no choice but providing the policymakers with the right information to take responsible decisions and save these reefs. So I think this is the essence of working together on a shared natural asset.
Would you like to add anything to the topic? You're on mute.
Yes, as Mao said, we had really, great times of collaboration, and this actually, the main output was really of strengthening, the relationship not on the personal level but also on the scientific level as well. And I I stress on the point that was raised by Maus that our major problem is that So policymakers seems to not recognize the efforts that is being paid or made by scientists. So they don't feel the urgencies of this collaboration to protect and preserve coral reef. And I actually, I would say, concluded that there is a kind of complete isolation between the science community and the decision maker community. So, and in some countries, it is very difficult to find, a matching or to find, a meeting between them. So, policymakers, they don't really understand what we are doing and why we are doing, and they are just waiting for international calls so that they react or they move toward coral or marine ecosystem protection. So as soon as a call is there, money is there, they start to move. But to be honest, in my experience, scientific efforts are not recognized by, political community. Yes.
Yeah, and I think that's a whole topic. The science policy interface and how do we strengthen it? That's also something that we research here in our context, and I'm sure not only here. It's a topic of research worldwide, but especially on the topic. And what do you do also when you have gaps where in different countries there is more collaboration between scientists and policymakers and other collaborating with other countries that don't. I want to read the question in the chat to Melanie on the Mesoamerican reef. I'm reading from the question. I missed the part on fishing because of connection issues. The four countries have different socioeconomic realities and different levels of reliance on fishing. So I imagine there are conflicting situations between the need for conservation and the need to not hinder coastal livelihoods. How is it actually arbitrated when scientific recommendations directly conflict with coastal livelihoods? And how does the transboundary framework in the Mesoamerican reef handle the different speeds of implementation? It's a broader question in this field. How do we handle the different speeds of implementation and cultural acceptance of environmental issues? So very relevant also to the different speeds of how each country integrates it into policy as well. So Melanie, to you.
The speed and the approach, I think those things both, because we have had, even within the same country, you have examples of top-down or bottom-up approaches. Even within one country, some MPAs, for example, have been developed with a more bottom-up, longer process, and some have been more like, okay, this place is definitely being protected, and it was implemented. And both have problems, both have, positives and negatives. I guess this is more the second part of the question. So with that timing, I think that one of the really important things is just giving voice to all of the local communities. So even if a protected area comes in a little faster than they are really comfortable with, it's giving them voice and a stake in the management. So there are management committees, and these NGOs that often have co-management agreements with government have, staff from the community. They have open doors. They have regular community meetings where you get to hear from those stakeholders, the fishers and the tourism people. And often within your community, you have, yes, there's fishers that they are usually the ones that, are impacted for a period of time, 44 to 5 years is the typical time frame that once you implement a fully protected zone, they will begin to see the benefits of that in the areas they fish outside that zone. But it does take 4 to 5 years. And they, in the meantime, have lost maybe half of their fishing area. So I think that is something that honestly, we as the NGO community have not done a good enough job in really taking care of them in that 4 to 5 year period. Many are hired as assistance in monitoring, or boat captains, or rangers. Many fishers have become rangers for the parks, but it's still not taking care of everyone. And those livelihood issues, I think they understand fundamentally that it's good for them in the long term by taking these areas and going to full protection, that it does provide the big fish that will be able to replenish their fishing areas, but they've still got to get through the 4 or 5 years of a little bit of a reduced catch because they have less fishing area. So it's, it's this ability to take care of them and give them alternatives. And there has been a lot of projects offering alternative livelihoods to help them be able to juggle different things, So.
Thank you, Melanie. And I'll actually see if there's any last question or comment from the panelists to each other before we close our session this morning/afternoon. Or any thoughts before we close? It could be also closing statements or question to each other.
I would just follow up on Ali's comment about monitoring as a good basis to start with. Have you ever done like a joint monitoring, like a big survey where you get people, scientists from the 4 different countries together and go do a survey so you can each see the other country's reefs and you do the whole thing as one team?
Yes, there was a joint cruise every half a year, so that we both can reach, the borders, yes, in the sea and near Maoz, and we were on the scientific ship of the IUI, but the main problem is that, and I really refer to Sulaiman's nice comment that it's all about that whether they want people, they feel secure when they do that or not. So everyone wants to play alone. This is really a problem, one of the challenges for us, but yes, there is, and I was a couple of times with my Israeli colleagues offshore, on board, but this should be, as I said, this should be implemented and recognized by both governments, so that it is real and also very well considered.
And maybe including people from the government in the research team. So you have a couple people from the Ministry of the Department of Fisheries or whoever is directly in charge of the coral reefs?
It's only me and 2 of my teams, the technician teams from the Marine Science Station.
But would that be possible? Could you invite someone from the department that is in charge of coral reefs to come on the survey and train them in diving and helping?
Sure, but sometimes there's the consequences of just an invitation itself.
Oh.
And we're just working, actually,
yes.
To your question, Melanie, we're working on reviving this effort through official channels.
Yeah.
Meaning that we have a function of the Aqaba Eilat Committee, which is actually a governmental and local authority function. And through this, we are trying to revive the shared monitoring expeditions that both Moaz and Ali were part of. And the governmental ministries were involved, but like you mentioned, and Ali, if you want to say any closing words on that, there has to be more efforts to involve national authorities as well.
I just want to add something very fast. What I noticed is that authorities in both countries are working together, and scientists on both countries are working together. But authorities and scientists to meet at the same time, this is the goal. And if this happens, then this is the beginning of the solution. Yes, and the beginning of really, I mean, applying a successful blue diplomacy. But what I notice sometimes, there are meetings I'm not invited to or I'm not a part of, and the meetings which I am a part of, no authorities. So that doesn't work like this. I mean, we have to, I mean, if you want a real solution, we have all sit on one table, you know, in one time, you know, and to talk about everything, you know, yeah.
It's a very interesting observation, actually, Ali. I know that the scientific community in Aqaba Eilat, they do collaborate, and the same thing with the government, but both groups don't tell the other that they are actually doing it. It's like it's very interesting. Yeah.
Yes. So
Once they move out of that, you know, exclusive, I think, careful way of dealing with it, I think things will be much better. But also going back to Melanie's question, what comes to my mind now is that initiative, which I think Maoz mentioned, is that when the Swiss did this effort in the region, and I think that was the only, at least what I know, the only time that included the majority of the countries at the Red Sea, not only the Gulf of Aqaba, which highlights the importance of this international third party that's, you know, not biased. Swiss is very known for that. Yeah.
We need to close our session, so thank you everyone for joining us, panelists and attendees, and we look forward to continuing the conversation. As you all noticed, there's a lot of work to be done, and at least I'm very happy and honored that with all the complexities that we all face day in and day out, that there's still a strong commitment to the field and to the collaboration and cooperation on the conservation of coral reefs. So thank you. And there's so much we can learn from each other's experience. So have a good day and thank you all.
Thank you, Rina.